Welcome to Hive Mind. This is Edge with my co-host Speaker. How are you, Speaker?
Okay. I have been better. I'm a little sick today, so Edge is going to take majority of the talking, which I'm pretty sure there's not one person out there that wouldn't prefer Edge's voice over mine. So I think we'll be okay.
I don't
But
know. Some
you
people
don't
like
know?
some people like the Aussie accent.
I don't know. Yours is easier on the ear, I think.
All right.
We're going to roll into this controversial topic that might get us a strike, but let's just do it.
It might. Today we're going to address the elephant in the room because this is important. It's an issue that needs to be discussed. We're going to talk about racism in America. And we're going to break down the facts versus the fiction because, that word racist gets thrown around a lot lately, doesn't it?
More than a lot, to a
Yeah.
detrimental point.
Right. To the point where it almost loses its true meaning.
Well, it has. Not almost. It has.
Yeah. And that's a terrible thing because racism is terrible and it should be shunned. It should be cast out of society wherever it's found. But when you're calling everyone racist, it really does devalue that term, doesn't it?
It devalues actual real racist movements in the world, which in the West, there's not as many as people would think.
Yeah. I think people are fed up with being called racist just because of their political beliefs or their ideology that has little or nothing to do with race at all, don't you think?
Yeah, or even their skin color.
Yeah.
I mean, it's to a point now where a lot of people, not, I don't want to say the majority on that side of things because I don't believe that. But a lot of people will simply, throw around the word racist now because you're white. It's become that way.
Or a
Or
Republican or a
or a
conservative
Republican
or a Trump supporter.
or anyone that has a differing view of you.
Hmm.
And that's where it loses its meaning.
Yeah, it does. So, what I'd like to do is take some time to break down some of the history of racism in America, dispel some of these myths about racism, and arm our listeners out there with some facts. Speaker, what party do you think most people associate with civil rights for people of color? And what party do you think most people associate with racism?
I think most people associate the left with the civil rights movements, but I know better.
Yeah, definitely. And they would probably, most people would associate the Republican Party or conservatives with racism, right?
Of course.
Yeah. That's true, but history proves just the opposite. And that's why I want to talk about some of the most important events in history that relate to racism in America. And then we'll talk about what's happening today. And it might make some more sense because there are a lot of parallels, don't you think?
100%.
Yeah, so we need to go all the way back to the origin of the Democrat Party, which began in 1829 when Andrew Jackson was elected. And Jackson himself was a slave owner. He owned over 100 slaves, and he was responsible for actually signing the Indian Removal Act, which displaced and killed thousands of natives. That was known as the Trail of Tears. And then we had Manifest Destiny, the whole Western expansion, and we acquired all of these Western territories. And that's actually when the Democrat Party was divided because they were divided on whether or not to expand slavery into those territories or let the states decide. And it was actually that division of the Democrat Party on the issue of slavery in these new territories that led to Abraham Lincoln winning the election because the Democrat Party was divided. This newly reformed Republican Party with Abraham Lincoln as their candidate won in 1860. And so the Republican Party was actually founded on this belief that slavery should not extend to these Western territories. And that led to the secession of the Southern Democrat states who supported slavery. which led to the Civil War. So, after this bloody Civil War was fought, 6 days after that, after the Confederate Army surrendered, John Wilkes Booth, who sympathized with slave owning Southern Democrats, killed Lincoln. And the death of Lincoln actually led to the vice president taking over, who was Andrew Johnson. And he was actually a Jacksonian Democrat. And he opposed voting rights for these newly freed Black slaves. And it was during Reconstruction after the Civil War that Black people actually made up the overwhelming majority of Southern Republican voters. And during the Reconstruction, over 600 Black men were elected as state legislatures as Republicans, and 16 Black Republicans served in Congress. So it's really interesting that the Republican Party has this perception of being racist when it was really the Republicans who were founded on this ideology that slave ownership should not exist. The Black vote was mostly Republican following the Civil War. And it was the Republicans who, had Black people hold office, the first offices, in state legislatures and in Congress. So it's really dispels a lot of these perceptions of the Republican Party, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Of course, the idea of Black people holding office and voting really pissed off these Southern Democrats. And they used the Ku Klux Klan as this militant terrorist organization to, intimidate and terrorize their political opponents, which were the Republicans and the Black people. Don't we see these same tactics in the same party using the same tactics today?
It's the same as just using fear in general to control the populace.
Yeah, but you see Antifa, you see BLM, they're like these militant organizations that are out causing havoc in the streets. And it's really designed to intimidate and terrorize people and to believing a certain ideology and being afraid to speak out against it. Don't you see that happening today?
Oh, yeah, everywhere. I think we all do. Well, the people whose eyes are open anyway and can see what sort of tactics are being used here.
So as much as things have changed, some things really have stayed the same. So let's talk about Planned Parenthood. I mean, their origins are plagued with racism and eugenics. Margaret Sanger, she held meetings on abortion and birth control at KKK rallies. And she wrote that infamous letter stating that, we don't want the word to get out, that we want to exterminate the Negro population. I mean, Planned Parenthood focused heavily on the population control of Black people in the South. I mean, where are most of the Planned Parenthood facilities located? In our cities, right?
I think Margaret Sanger was a big red pill for a lot of Black people as well, because you see a lot of Black people that have moved over to either the conservative side or just moderates. Once they learn about Margaret Sanger, once they learn about Planned Parenthood and the killing of Black babies by the millions, they sort of wake up a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, 79% of Planned Parenthood abortion facilities are in minority communities. So nothing's changed. And even though Black women make up only 14% of the women's population, they account for actually 36% of the abortions.
It's staggering.
It is. Black women have the highest ratio of abortions than any other group. I mean, a ratio of that's 474 abortions to every 1,000 live births. And it's the number one killer of Black lives in America. Listen to this. More than HIV, homicide, diabetes, accidents, cancer, and heart disease combined. If Black Lives Matter, then this should be the focus. And when you look at the origins of Planned Parenthood, you have to understand its racist eugenics origins. And take that into consideration. I mean, this could be considered a genocide. Can it not?
It is. It is a genocide.
And which party is the party that supports Planned Parenthood?
Democrats.
Of course. I mean, see, as much as things change, they stay the same. So they want to try and say that, everything switched sides. The parties switched sides. Do you really think that happened? I mean, it was only maybe like 1%. 1% of.
It was three. It was three people.
Okay, three
people.
Yeah, switch sides. But the votes did switch. They switched, from majority Republican and then to Democrat during the Great Depression, and then also again during the Civil Rights Act, which was signed by Lyndon Johnson, who was a Democrat. He's quoted as saying, quote, "I'll have them N-words voting Democrat for 200 years." Because you have to understand, when the Democrats realized that they couldn't prevent Black people from voting, that they were going to make damn sure that they voted Democrat. And so this is the mindset that they've had ever since, is that they feel like they own the Black vote, that they own Black people in general without doing much to get it. I mean, look at, Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. They have long histories of legislation for mass Black incarceration. And every Democrat city and state, Black people are seeing higher murder rates, higher unemployment, lower incomes, higher incarceration rates, higher crime, right?
And for some reason, it's all blamed on Republicans. It's weird.
It is.
It's just strange, where all these communities are democratic communities or have democratic leaders in some sort of a way that do nothing for them.
Yeah. I mean, you want to take a step back and look at the laws that were created by Democrats. The Democrats supported Black codes, Jim Crow laws. They opposed the civil rights of 1964. I mean, Democrat senators filibustered for 75 days. And Democrat Senator Robert Byrd himself, who was a KKK exalted cyclops and a Democrat, he filibustered for 14 hours. And Byrd, he once led this KKK chapter of 150 members. And he's quoted as saying, "I shall never fight in the armed forces with a Negro by my side." And this is a man that Joe Biden gave a eulogy for when he died.
As also noted, Robert C. Byrd was a parliamentary library, a keeper of the institution of the Senate, and he was the institution itself. But to me, and many people here today, like guys I see, Bill Bradley and Jim Sasser, who've long left the Senate for greener pastures, and I hope better remuneration. We used to kid about that too, but for a lot of us, he was a friend, and he was a mentor, and he was a guide.
These simple things can tell you all you really need to know. I mean, and you can look at the internal dialogue of some of these people, such as Joe Biden's comment the other month, which was, if you don't vote for me, then you're not Black.
Exactly. These people feel like they own Black votes and Black people still.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't Black.
I mean, Hillary said the same thing about Robert Byrd.
It is almost impossible to imagine the United States Senate without Robert Byrd. He was not just its longest serving member, he was its heart, its soul, and its historian. From my first day in the Senate, I sought out his guidance, and he was always generous with his time and his wisdom.
It really tells you what they truly believe. They truly believe that they own the Black vote. And I actually think that they feel like they own the Black people. Not much different than the Democrats in the 1800s, right?
Exactly the same.
So that's why we're seeing, I think, a lot of people waking up and leaving the Democrat Party.
And we're seeing more Black Republicans than we've seen in so long. I mean, Kim Klacik, who brought that video would be last week before we dropped this, which has gone completely viral, which is fantastic, where she walks through Baltimore. I mean, there's others, Brian Donaldson or Donalds. It's another person that's going to probably win their primary. So we're seeing so many of these black people in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And
that ad by Kim Klacik was just phenomenal. She's running for Republican. She's representing the 7th Congressional District of Maryland, right? And she talks about how the Democrat-run Baltimore is like top 5 most dangerous cities. It's been run by Democrats for over 50 years. She talks about how Black lives actually do matter. It's not just a slogan or this Marxist organization, how Black lives matter. And if so, these communities, which have been Democrat-run communities, should matter, right? So let's talk about Black Lives Matter, because, I feel like that slogan and that organization has really usurped what it should mean, that all Black lives do actually matter, and everybody can agree with that. But really, they've taken over that, and it's become more about an ideology rather than advocacy for, all Black lives.
Yeah, well, it is an ideology. I mean, the creators, Alicia Garza and Patrisse Cullors, I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry if I got it wrong. But they started Black Lives Matter in 2013 when the hashtag Black Lives Matter started trending on social media. And this was 13 months after the death of Trayvon Martin, which, if people don't know that story, he was shot in self-defense by a man named George Zimmerman. Now, George Zimmerman was acquitted of this, and it was acquitted of it in self-defense. It was never registered as a hate crime. But after that, after he was acquitted, this hashtag popped up on social media. And then it just kind of ran with everything. And Patrisse Cullors has said in an interview that's recently just come out in 2015, where she said the first thing is that we actually do have an ideological frame. We're trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. They've never hit it.
I think that the criticism is helpful. I also think that it might. I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
They've never, like, credit to them. It's always been out in the open that they are a Marxist organization, admitted by the founders.
Right. And so now, in order to support Black Lives Matter, the organization, you have to also then support Marxism, right?
Well, a lot of people don't know that they're supporting Marxism, though. That's the catch-22 here. There's a lot of people that I believe in this Black Lives Matter, or are supporting it in some way, such as posting black squares on Instagram or something like that, or in some way, shape, or form backing the movement, are probably people that don't know about Marxism. They don't understand it, and they don't realize that this is not a group that all black people support either. There's a lot of black people furiously against Black Lives Matter.
Right, because Black Lives Matter, they support Planned Parenthood, they support abortion, and as we've just mentioned, Planned Parenthood has adversely affected the Black community. So, there are many people who do believe Black Lives Matter, and many Black people who support, advocate for all Black lives. But that also includes, for them, in their minds, the lives of the unborn. And they feel like that it is a form of genocide, what Planned Parenthood is doing to the Black community, and has done for decades and decades, right?
But we see their actions now, especially their collaboration with Antifa, that has taken it to a place where it is setting race relations back 20 years. Right?
Yeah.
From what we're seeing with the burning of buildings, which we've seen spokespeople come out for them saying anything that black people rob is reparations. Now, when you hear stuff like that, that this is a group that is willing to take over. They want to take over. They want to change the system. They want to tear down the system. They want to burn it down. Their alliances are exactly the same as Antifa.
Now, their leaders have said that if they don't get what they want, they will burn the system down. They've basically threatened and held the American people hostage. And, you know, when I understand that there are millions of people who really don't understand the origins of Black Lives Matter, what their true ideology is, that it is a Marxist organization. And they've donated millions and millions of dollars to this organization, all of which is funneled then to what, Act Blue, which is then funneled to one party, the Democrat Party, Joe Biden. And Joe Biden has received tons and tons of donations. In fact, I think his campaign got the most donations it had, you know, in like that time frame, just following the murder of George Floyd, and that huge, massive influx of millions of dollars to the Black Lives Matter organization, right? So you see, it's really more about an ideology than it is about all Black lives. Because if it was, then you know there are plenty of people out there who believe Black lives do matter, and that includes the police officers. You know, they support police officers like David Dorn, who was killed in these riots.
So that's the problem though. Like, of course, Black Lives Matter. All right, but this is the word game that they play on it through a lot of things. It's the same as Planned Parenthood. It sounds fine. Who doesn't want to plan their parenthood? Do you know what I mean? It's the same with Black Lives Matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter. So does Asians. So does white people. So does everybody's life matter. Like, we get it. Okay? But this organization is hiding behind this name as if it represents every black person.
It doesn't.
Which it does not.
It does not. It only represents the people who share the same ideology as them.
The black people that don't agree with their ideology, they might as well just be white people to them.
When any black person departs from the Democrat Party, does not support Black Lives Matter, just because they don't support the ideology of the organization doesn't mean that they don't believe Black Lives Matter. But they're labeled these horrible names.
They got more racism than anybody, I think, honestly, is when someone switches or leaves the Democratic Party. It's just there's all guns on them, and it's horrible to see.
Right.
So, like, it breaks my heart. So like that's why I have so much respect for black Republicans, because it takes a lot.
Right.
They get more hate than white people on the Republican side. They cop it from everywhere.
So who stands to gain the most from this division? Because I feel like a lot of it is drummed up, a lot of it is stoked by Black Lives Matter, by Antifa, by the Democrat Party. They even create hoaxes to drum up more racism.
Yeah, well, we see that absolutely everywhere now, don't we? I mean, it's just to name a few. We all know Juicy Smollett. We all know what happened in that case. And for those who don't, this was an actor, an entertainer, that said while he was walking down Chicago, he was attacked by two white people wearing MAGA hats. They put a noose around his neck and they threw bleach on him. So now straight away, when most people heard that, well, most people that are conservative on the right heard that, were like, that's so full of shit. That didn't happen. These things don't happen. Not to, like, that is, it's, just think about it. No one does that. No one does that. But straight away, the media and Democratic representatives, Kamala Harris being one of them, straight away started to back him. Right, and he was going on TV shows and he was telling how terrible this racist ordeal was, and they were calling him a hero, and it blew up, and it blew up for about a month before he got caught out on it. Bubba Wallace was another one, right? Did the same thing, found a noose in his garage. It wasn't a noose, it was a pull down thing for the garage, right? And it was there since before he was even racing, right? But they use these things and they blow them up so much.
Right.
And
Let's say who they is, because it's really this conspiracy between the Democrat Party and the mainstream media who push this narrative to where it is so just it's everywhere. You can't avoid it. It's on every news station. It's on printed in every newspaper. It's on social media, just everywhere, to where you really just cannot avoid it, and it's just saturated with this racist narrative, right? And it goes
or
viral real fast.
oh, real fast. I mean, I read a CNN article the other day, just going down my feed, and this is a perfect example. And the headline was, "Black babies have more of a chance of surviving if they're delivered by black doctors and not white doctors." Right? So that is the propaganda they're going to throw into your face. Right? And it's ridiculous. It stokes so much fear and racism.
Right. And every time the Democrats, and we've seen with the Democrat National Convention this week, we've seen Michelle Obama and various others speaking, and they just never fail to bring up, white nationalists and try to force this alignment between Trump and Trump supporters and white nationalists. And then they, in the same breath, will blame the Republicans for causing racial division in the country, when in actuality it just seems like that's all they do.
But they disguised it very well. For anyone not looking in or anyone that's not awake to certain agendas and stuff, they, take what they say as gospel. And they're like, yes, look at this. Look what's happening. Yes, he's a racist. Yes, he's that. Yes, he doesn't support Black Lives Matter. Okay, so that makes him a racist. Or whoever doesn't support Black Lives Matter, they are a racist. And that's where it sort of loses its meaning.
A lot of people who have been locked up at home, unable to work, unable to go to church, unable to send their kids to school, while watching Black Lives Matter protests and Antifa riots go down in the streets daily, month in and month out, while being called racist. Oh, we're racist because we don't support what they're doing. I think people are fed up with it. They're fed up with it, aren't they?
Well, we see them going to suburban areas now, telling people that, they're gonna, they're on stolen land and they have to give back their house and stuff like that. And it's like, really? It's this, and a lot of them, they're so programmed that way and they're taught so much that way that it's like they can't let the past die. And this is what you've got to do with racism. It has to just fade away, which a lot of us don't. Like I said, I don't see color. Color's not a thing to me. Race is not a thing to me. Do you know what I mean? I will treat someone how they treat me. I will respect someone if they respect me. It works like that. If someone's qualified for a job and they're like, so this is where affirmative action can come into play, which is inherently a racist system. It fails like the whole system. If you were picking a black person simply because they're black, instead of someone with proper qualifications or proper merit or character, then you start causing problems of an influx all throughout society.
Yeah. I think that with affirmative action, there was a need initially to help give the disenfranchised a leg up. that was decades ago.
Hmm.
And the consequences of having it around still now are completely switched. So I think that it is detrimental at this point. I understand why it was initially put in place, but it's so incredibly outdated, and to still go back to that and say that that's necessary and even more needs to be done, it's insane. It's
It's
insane to
ludicrous.
me. It's ludicrous.
The idea of white privilege is also inherently racist, right? For even from the people saying that, you're saying white people are better than black people.
Yeah, it is.
That's exactly what it's saying, which isn't true, right? So whoever's putting that label out there is thinking in a racial way,
Right.
which is horrible. Because, but also something like white privilege puts a collective guilt onto an entire race, and I've talked about this before, that never ends well when you put collective guilt on an entire race, because, well, Hitler's a perfect example. He did it to the Jews. It's the same ideology, and it's extremely destructive.
It is extremely destructive. And I think that it has set back race relations by decades, to continue with this extremely destructive ideology. It seems like the Democrat Party, that's all the platform they run on is
It is the platform they run on.
it's division. And they need that. They know that they need the black vote. They know they're losing the black vote in droves, like millions of votes are leaving the Democrat Party. They see what's happening in these Democrat run cities. They see the failures over decades. They see the false promises that just never are fulfilled. And they're leaving. They're leaving. They're done with the lies. And so the only thing I think the Democrats have left to run on is the division and trying to regain some kind of foothold in that voting bloc.
And it's establishing the victim hierarchy that they use and that they push, whether it comes to sexuality, gender, race. It's this victim hierarchy.
We'll see what happens in November, but I think that Trump is going to actually get a massive percentage of the black vote because people are sick and tired of the lies, the hate, and the division.
Well, it's definitely going to be interesting to see.
And I think that just the nation in general has been ripped apart, and we're sick. We're sick and tired of being racially divided. We're sick and tired of being told that we're racists. And we're sick and tired of the misconceptions of conservatives as racists.
And I think I'm not even conservative. I'm lumping myself in there for this, but like I think people are sick of the word being undermined, because racism is a real thing. Like you said before, there are racists out there. Yes, there is racist people in America, but they are not the majority, and they're not just white people.
No,
there is racist black people. There is racist white people.
Yes.
And this is what we're seeing.
This is the misconception, is that racism exists only on one side, one party line, and it's not true. Racism exists on both sides, and it's not as big of a problem as it's being overblown to be. And you're right, that word has been thrown around so much that it's lost its meaning. And we need to regain that meaning and identify it where it truly exists.
Nailed it. Hit it on the head. But we're seeing now with certain events, such as this George Floyd event, right? We're all in agreement that was wrong. No, what he did was excessive. It was wrong, and he should be charged with murder.
Absolutely.
Right?
And
That's standard.
the entire country was united on that front.
Yep.
I didn't know anybody that felt like that police officer shouldn't be completely prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Of course he should. But then
Absolutely.
on the side note from that, we didn't even know if that was racially motivated,
Mm-mm.
right? But because that's all they see, it was a white person killing a black person, it becomes a racial issue. And they use it and then they push it and they'll blow it up. We've seen this a couple of weeks later with Rashad Brooks, that was shot by a couple of police officers after he did a sobriety test. But in that situation, he stole a taser off a cop. He resisted arrest. He ran away, and he was shot because of it.
Right. He
But
shot the
yeah,
taser at the
yep,
cop at his head.
right.
So we do see cases where definitely police officers have used extreme force, police
Of course.
officers have been in the wrong, but then we see many cases where police officers are acting in self-defense. And I don't think that anybody actually even argues that we shouldn't have some sort of police reform, that we shouldn't have some sort of transparency. I think a lot of people agree, especially in these Democrat-run cities, where the police unions don't really penalize police officers in the way they should. They do a lot of covering up of things, and a lot of these cops are dirty cops that need to be let go, that need to be kicked off the force, that need to be prosecuted. I think everybody could get behind that, but that does not push an agenda to divide. And the purpose of all of this, where the media overblows it, the Democrat Party overblows it, all of these organizations like Black Lives Matter overblow it, is because the only way they galvanize people to make the changes that they want to make, which is moving towards a Marxist ideology, electing Democrat people, is to cause division, right?
Mhm.
You can't
And
have people united on that front.
we can't. But we all have to come to the realization that there is bad people in the world. Doesn't matter. Bad black people, bad white people, bad Asian people. There's bad people that do bad things, right? But if you're only focusing on one aspect of what's bad in society, like let's talk about Cannon Hinnett, I think his name was, the 5-year-old kid that got shot the other day by a black guy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where was the media on that until people blew it up, right? It was nowhere because it didn't fit into their political agenda. And we don't know if that was a racist issue. I don't know if that was a racist issue from what I read. It could be just a crazy person.
Case after case of Black Lives Matter protesters and Antifa rioters that are violently assaulting individuals. And the case of Keith's Love just happened this week. A black man brutally assaulted a white man, kicked him in the head to the point where he was unconscious. We don't even see that on, the mainstream news. We don't hear much about it because it doesn't really support that narrative of the peaceful protests and the white on black crimes.
Yeah, well, it doesn't work for them, so it's not worth reporting on. It doesn't provide them with any leg up.
Right.
Which is completely sinister and completely not how a society should run, but that's what happens when you control the media.
Yeah. So it is a conspiracy between the media and the Democrat Party, I believe, to perpetuate this agenda and this narrative that it is completely one-sided. Everything is racially motivated.
And some members of the Republican Party. There's swamp everywhere, man.
Yeah, good point. There's definitely swamp creatures on both sides. People are sick and tired of being called racists and that word losing its true meaning. And that was the point of this conversation, is to really identify that and also look back at the history of racism in America and dispel some of these rumors and false narratives about racism.
And hopefully we can all kind of come together at one point in time or in the future to make a better world and stop looking at our past and thinking that it's the present.
Exactly. All right, guys, thanks for joining us today here on Hive Mind. Please be sure to share this podcast. We'll see you back next time, right here on Hive Mind.